Hi everyone, my name is Lucia Wang, and today we're going to talk about the two things you need to do if you find yourself in a toxic relationship. This is a question that I hear very often. A lot of us, we find ourselves in a relationship that is toxic. And usually the question that always comes up is, how do I deal with a toxic relationship? What do I do, right? Um, Before we get started, though, I want us to understand the meaning of self-pity. According to Wiktionary Online, self-pity is a noun and it's defined as feeling sorry for oneself, being depressed about one's situation. So the reason why I want to talk about this word self-pity is that if you're in a toxic relationship, chances are you're feeling sorry for yourself. At some point, if you stay in a relationship long enough, you will feel sorry for yourself. And so I just want us to understand that when we are in a toxic relationship, we will eventually feel self-pity, which is not a good thing, okay? Because as it says, you will end up being depressed, okay? I hear so many of us in toxic relationships who are allowing ourselves to wallow in our self-pity. When we allow us toxic people in our lives, we eventually start feeling sorry for ourselves, and if we stay in it long enough, we will become depressed if we're not careful. Years ago in my mid-20s, I dated a guy who was highly toxic. The relationship was so toxic that I finally had to go to get counseling. I remember in my first counseling session how I was complaining about how horrible this guy was, how he treated me so badly. And this went on for like 5 or 10 minutes where I just kept telling the counselor, complaining to the counselor, everything that's happened to me and how he's treated me. And after I finished talking, my counselor quietly said to me, I want you to understand that I'm not concerned about him, but I'm more concerned about you. I'd like you to go home tonight and think about this. And folks, this is something that I just wanted to share because it's very, very important and part of my personal growth. During that time in my mid-20s, I had fallen for a guy in college. I was in college and I met a guy that I was just head over heels with. But however, we weren't on the same page. He was working and he had a full life and he was not looking for a relationship. Okay, I was looking for a relationship. Of course, I was in love with him. I wanted a relationship with him. Well, we had the kind of relationship where we fought a lot, we were fighting a lot, and it was a fight. It was a makeup and breakup kind of relationship. So if you guys ever experienced that, then you know what I'm talking about. We were making up or breaking up, and making up, and it was just not a good relationship. And I was constantly, crying and arguing and mad and angry and but yet we'd always come back together again and see each other for a day or two, and then we'd fight again, and it was just not a good relationship. So my counselor, what was surprising to me is that she wasn't concerned about him. I was going on, and then she finally said to me, I want you to go home and think about this. And this is what she said to me, which I want to pass on to all of you. Healthy people gravitate towards healthy people. Let me say it again. Healthy people gravitate towards healthy people. So I went home that night and I thought about what my counselor said. After I finished eating, I went to my room and I laid there on my bed and I'm thinking, healthy people gravitate towards healthy people. In the beginning, I wasn't, really wasn't letting the words sink in. But when I thought about it some more, I realized, oh my gosh, if she's saying that healthy people gravitate towards healthy people, and I'm obviously in an unhealthy relationship, that means I'm unhealthy. So I was just totally blown away that evening to realize that it's no wonder why my counselor wasn't interested in the guy that was causing me all this heartache. She was more interested in me because she wanted me to become healthier. So I just want to say, if we perceive we are in a toxic relationship, in a toxic, unhealthy relationship, then we need to realize the truth that we are unhealthy too. Because if we were healthy to begin with, we would not find unhealthy people attractive, and vice versa. Meaning unhealthy people wouldn't find us attractive because unhealthy people are attracted to unhealthy people. As the saying goes, misery loves company. So I want to stop right here and talk about this for a few minutes. Misery loves company, right? We all know that. And we know why that's the case. If you're a miserable person, or if you know people that are miserable, they don't want to be around people that are happy, right? Miserable people are comfortable with people that are also miserable and unhappy. So this way they can be their miserable selves and be accepted for who they are, right? A happy person doesn't want to be around someone that's unhappy. Happy people want to be around happy people, because if they hang out with unhappy people long enough, it will bring them down, right? And they will become unhealthy as well. So it works both ways. So we need to realize that if you find yourself attracted to unhealthy people, it's because you're unhealthy. If you're a healthy, happy person, you would not find unhealthy, toxic people attractive. So that's why when a lot of people ask me, what do I do? How I'm in a bad relationship. What should I do? And so I always have to say that you definitely need to go to counseling, number one, because if you find yourself in a toxic relationship for a very long time, you are also probably have other issues as well. You become codependent. I'm sure you guys all heard that term. Codependency is a serious problem when you are in a relationship long enough that's not healthy and toxic. Okay, because you become dependent on this. Your happiness and your whole life is you've poured into this one person. You become codependent to that person, emotionally, physically. It's to a point where now if you're in that situation and you become unhappy and depressed, you definitely need to go to counseling to address the codependency issue, and you also need to address why you're attracted to unhealthy people, and your counselor will help you with that. Your counselor will ask you about your childhood, what things could have triggered it, what kind of trauma you've experienced in your childhood that is causing you to act out, to keep finding yourself being attracted to people that are not healthy for you. Okay, so this is my answer. Usually I always tell people you need to go see a counselor. But as far as toxic relationships go, it's not just for romantic people that you're involved with. Today's subject that we're going to talk about also applies to family members and friends. You heard me say it, that's right. It's to family members and friends. Most of us have dysfunctional families, and so there's always one family member or two or three that we have problems with, that every time we're around them we don't feel good about ourselves, and they are negative people, or they make us feel bad, or they try to manipulate us. So I want you to listen carefully, and the two things we're going to talk about, it will also apply to any kind of toxic relationship, not just romantic partners, but to family or friends as well. So what is the best way to deal with a toxic relationship? You need to do these two things, okay? Number one, set your boundaries. Very important. Set your boundaries. And what do I mean by setting a boundary? Have a serious conversation with the person and discuss your feelings and the behaviors that hurt you, and propose a solution. If the toxic person shuts you out or becomes hostile and won't accept responsibility for his or her actions, then you'll need to set boundaries by limiting your interactions with that person. Meaning, limit how often and how long you spend with them. If after doing that the person's behaviors get worse and more toxic, then you'll have no choice but to take the next step, which is step number 2. But before we go into step number 2, I want to stop here and talk a little bit about this first step of setting a boundary. So what does that look like? Okay, in a toxic relationship, if you're in a toxic relationship, if that means that if you see this guy, let's say you date him 3 times a week, you need to reduce it to maybe once a week, okay, or maybe twice a week. It's just limiting your exposure to this person. But before you do that, you need to have a discussion with this person. Let's say it's a romantic partner, and you say, "Hey, look, I want to talk to you. It's very serious. I've been feeling really down. Every time that we're together, this relationship is making me very sad." So you make sure you phrase it as, "This relationship is making me sad," or "I'm feeling very sad in this relationship." People always say you should use the word I. I'm feeling sad in this relationship. I'm feeling depressed in this relationship. I'm feeling stressed in this relationship, okay? You don't want to, if you say you are making me stressed or you are making me depressed, they're going to get defensive, and then they'll probably shut down and will not want to continue the conversation. So I would say the best thing to do is to say I. Use the word I. I feel depressed. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling stressed, okay? And so been doing some thinking, and I think it's best that we just, cooled off for a little bit. Instead of seeing each other 3 times a week, I said, let's just see each other once a week and see how that goes for a while. If this could, and call out the behaviors, right? When you make fun of me in public, or when you use foul language, or when you yell at me, or when we're trying to discuss something and you start, making fun of me, or you put me down, call out the exact behaviors that hurt you. When you do these things, X, Y, Z, right? I feel hurt. That's how you word it. Say, when you say these things, you're making me, don't try to not use the word you. But you will need to use the word you when you're pointing out behaviors. When you say this, when you do this, this is how I feel. Okay, so this is very important. The way of now, there's no guarantee. Your partner may still get upset with you, because if they are negative, they'll probably get real defensive at this point, right? The negative people, toxic people, or a narcissistic person, because usually narcissistic people are toxic, right? They will probably start feeling real defensive as you're explaining how you feel. They're going to get real defensive, and they're going to try to shut you down. Okay, so it's very important that this is how you want to approach the person, and say, this is what I'm proposing. And then after you propose this, just say, so I would like us to see each other just once a week and see how it goes. If things improve for a few weeks, then maybe we can go back. Maybe we can try seeing each other twice a week. And that means, and I mean not just in person, but phone, but any kind of communication. If you, let's say at this point you've been talking to him every single day, right? Usually when you meet someone, if your head's over heels, you're usually on the phone with him every single day. You need to cut that down. Okay, now that you've identified these behaviors or things that are happening that are making you unhappy, you need to propose a solution that's going to reduce the how long, what did I say here? How long and how often, right? So that includes phone calls or text messages. Okay, if you're texting every day, let's say you're texting every hour, all right? You just change it to 3 times a day, right? If you're on the phone with him every single day, if you're on the phone with him every day, you could maybe cut down the amount of time you spend with him. Maybe after school, after work, you're on the phone with him for 4 hours each night. Knock it down to 1 hour. Okay, so it's just, you get the idea. It's just limiting your exposure to the toxicity. You've got to do that, folks. Okay, and even after you limit yourself, let's say he goes along with it, and you limit the interaction and the time. If the conversation still goes bad, it still gets into that point where it's toxic, then we need to take step number 2. But we'll still talk about this first step. Okay, so this is how you set a boundary. And this goes for family members and friends. Same thing. Okay, depending how. Now, with family members, most of us live far away from our families, right? So if you see your family member on special occasions or holidays, or let's say, I know we just had Christmas and the New Year's, most of us spend at least 2 or 3 days with our family members, right? In those situations, when you're not really seeing them that often, how you would limit it is, when you're with them, just don't spend that much time with them, right? If you're in a room with all your family members, with all your relatives, you don't need to just sit with that one toxic person the whole time. So let's say you're at the table, if you're eating at the table, right, with the whole family. You may not want to sit next to that person. Purposely intentionally find a seat away from that person, so you're not stuck with that person the whole night, the whole time you're eating and talking, right? That's one way that's just a suggestion. And and if you do end up talking to that person, if you're there for the 3 days or 2 days, however, with your family, you don't need to spend that much time talking to that person. So I would just limit my time with that person. Okay. And this is just, and if same thing, if you're on the phone with them, if they call you, ask you how you're doing, just say everything is great. And I wouldn't go too much into the personal stuff. And the reason why I say this is because toxic people, they like all that drama, and they're just trying to find something more. They're trying to get more and more information out of you so they can use this as a way to hurt you in the future. And I really hate saying that, folks, because it's really not a healthy thing, and it's really sad when we have family members, especially, or friends that behave that way, because it's very hurtful. We all want to be able to open up to our friends and family. We all want to be able to be truthful and express how we feel and be honest, right? The problem is when you're around toxic people, it's very hard to be yourself, as you well know already. If you're in a toxic relationship, then you know what I'm talking about. It's very difficult to be yourself. It seems like they don't accept you for the way you are, right? And they want to change you or they want to make you miserable. So, and then if you told them anything that was personal, they will use that against you to hurt you if you ever get to a point where if you ever did something or said something that they perceived as a hurt, they'll go back to their memory bank to remember the things you've said that they can use to hurt you. So that's why I recommend that if you realize you're in a toxic relationship, you need to start holding back on the things you say. Still be yourself. I'm not asking you to, I would never ask anyone to be fake or not be yourself. But this is at this point we're talking about self-preservation. You need to protect yourself when you're around people that are toxic, because they will do anything, they will use anything to hurt you. And if that means the things that you said, the words that you said out of your own mouth, it's not worth it. It's not worth the aggravation in the future. So just be careful that when you're around them, you need to limit your time, right? How long you spend with them, how often you spend with that person, and the things you say to that person. Very important. Okay. And um, you don't need to lie, but just be very vague about things. So they ask you how you're doing, just say, "Oh, everything's great." You don't want to say, "Oh, well, I'm mad at so and so, and this happened to me." If you give them negative things, they'll remember it, and then they know that something bothered you. They'll use that thing to hurt you later on, because they know from past experiences the things you told them that hurt you. They will remember that. A real friend will, of course, will never try to do those things to you, but we're talking about toxic people. Okay, they don't think normally, and they are going to think about ways to injure you emotionally. Okay, so I just want to keep that in mind. That's the first thing. So you just want to set your boundaries. Okay, and with friends, same thing, same as family members. You just want to limit how long, how often, and the things you say to that person. Okay, now let's say you've tried all this, and your romantic partner or your family member or your friends don't respect your boundary. Let's say you said, okay, let's just gonna do this. We're only gonna talk once a week, or let's say it's a family member. We're only gonna talk once a week, and they call you 3 times a week, right? They find an excuse to get in touch with you. I mean, emergency aside, we're not talking about emergencies. We're just talking about they just disrespect your words, okay? Or and that's another thing. If they start behaving rudely, that's another thing that's part of the boundary also, is that you need to set the boundaries, not just how often, what you say, but you also need to let that person know that you won't tolerate any more bad treatment from them. And you list that out, okay? If you have to write it down and read it to him or her, that's what you need to do. Just say, look, whenever you do this, I feel this way. So I would appreciate it from now on, going forward, that you do not say these things to me, or I would appreciate if you don't do these things. Okay? You need to be very specific. You need to be very specific of the things that are said and done that hurt you, and make sure that's part of the boundaries that you're going to set for yourself to protect yourself. So what you want to do, you set your boundaries, and then you want to set the consequences of those boundaries. If their boundaries are not met and not respected, then you need to come up with consequences. Meaning, what you say is, whenever you talk to me that way, I feel very ashamed and humiliated in front of everybody. So I'd appreciate from now on, going forward, I do not want you to talk to me that way anymore. And if you do, then I'm going to have to further distance myself from you. Okay, I don't want to have to do this. I want to be able to build a healthy relationship with you, but I don't want to feel any more pain, and I don't want to feel disrespected. So going forward, if you say these things, X, Y, and Z, if you do these things, X, Y, and Z, then instead of seeing each other once a week, I'm going to have to make it once a month. Okay, so please think about, I am hoping that we can get through this and work through this together and build a healthy relationship. And that's it, folks. That's all you have to say. You set your boundaries, set your consequences, and then if they breach, if they disrespect and breach the boundaries, then we got to go into step number 2. Okay, and whatever you said the consequences were, you need to go through with it at this point. Okay, we don't want to say things and then not follow through, because that does not, that first of all, we have our integrity, right? We want to be true to ourselves, and we want to be honest with ourselves. So if we say something, we have to honor it. Okay, as difficult as it may be to go through the consequences, you must do it for yourself, to protect yourself. So if they break a boundary and you've already said, okay, if you do this, then we're gonna reduce it to once a month instead of once a week that we see each other, you need to go through with it. So at the minute it happens and they're breaking your boundary, then you need to say to that person, I am feeling upset again, and I know we've talked about this, and I said that if you do this again, then we're gonna have to I'm gonna have to limit our interactions even more at this point. So instead of once a week, we're gonna go to once a month, and hopefully our relationship can improve. Okay, so this is the kind of conversation you must have with your toxic person if they break the boundary and disrespect you. Okay, now number 2. Let's say you've done that, you've done the consequence thing, and they still disrespect you on the consequence. Even now you cut down to once a month, and you are still having unpleasant, unhealthy interactions with that person. Okay, then what do you do? Okay, well, this is the second thing that you need to do. You need to avoid them completely. Okay, avoid toxic people is number 2. And that may mean cutting them out of your life completely. And that may be cutting out your life completely. If you must be with them at a family reunion, if they're a family member, you can be cordial, polite, and just smile or say hello. You don't need to engage in any long conversation with them, and the same applies to anyone else that is toxic. The key is to disconnect from them and never allow that person to be close to you, so they can't ever hurt you again. And it's important not to take it personally, because you need to realize that they're so toxic that they don't even realize or know that they're toxic. And they are toxic to everyone around them, not just to you. Let me say this again. They are so toxic. The reason why that you don't want to, most of us, when we get to this point, okay, we're feeling so bad that we think it's something that we did, that maybe we did something wrong, or we tend to take it personally, right? If someone is yelling at you and cursing at you, or saying mean things to you, or they're rude to you, some of us, by human nature, we do take it personally, right? It's very, very upsetting, and we take it personally. But what I want you guys to realize is to not take it personally, because they're so toxic that they don't even realize that they're toxic. And they're toxic to everyone around them, not just to you. So folks, if you think about the people that are toxic in your life, it's not just to you. Chances are, most likely, they are behaving this way around the whole orbit around them, meaning their social circle, everyone around them, their friends, their family, their coworkers, right? Everyone around them, they are treating this way. They don't even realize this is how they are. That's why they are that way. So that's why you can't take it personally, because if you seriously look closer at their life, they treat everyone that way. Okay, it's normal to take it personally, but I just want to say, try not to. Just take a step back and think about it. Okay, I know there's people in my lives, the people that have been toxic. It's true. They treat everyone around them the same way. And then it's amazing that you'll find, which is kind of sad actually, is that you'll see that everyone else around them are also feeling upset. Right? They don't have good relationships like with anybody else around in their whole life. They don't get along with coworkers. They don't get along with their family, their friends. The only people that get along with are people that are also unhappy and miserable. And that's even a questionable relationship, actually, right? If you're just around miserable people all the time, how great of a friend can they be, right? I know people that are so toxic, and I know the people around them that are their so-called friends or family, and those so-called friends or family people, they are also toxic, because misery loves company. And those other people that are toxic, they're not a joy to be around with either. And so what kind of a friend do you have when your friend is so miserable all the time? The only thing the two can do is just have a little pity party and talk about other people. They like to gossip. That's another sign of someone that's toxic. They gossip continuously. They love to gossip. They love to say bad things about people. And so when they get together with other people that are miserable, that's what they're doing. They're having a pity party, and they're also sitting there talking bad about other people. They're trashing other people that they can think of they don't like or they're jealous of. And so really and truly, the people that are around them are not healthy people. And they're not really going to be good friends, because to be a good friend, you have to be positive and happy. You can't be negative, right? So just realize that. Just if you would, take a step back and put things in perspective and realize, don't take it personally if you're with someone that's toxic and they're treating you that way. They're treating everyone that way. Okay. So at this point, on the second point, we need to realize we need to cut people off at this point. If we've tried setting boundaries, which is point number one, we try setting our boundaries, we set our consequences, and they still mistreat us. They still refuse to improve their behavior and speech towards us. Then we need to come to this second step, which is avoid toxic people. It's a tough pill to swallow, and I know that we all don't like to think about having to cut off people that we don't like, and that includes family members and friends. I think the most difficult to cut off would be a family member or family members, maybe one or two, right? But we have to do it, folks. We have to do it for our own protection. Life is too short, and we cannot continually let someone try to destroy us and treat us, mistreat us. We cannot. You don't deserve that. None of us deserve to be treated that way. So now with a romantic partner, you're just going to have to let him go or let her go. Whoever, if you're a man or a woman, you have to let that person go. Okay. There's plenty of people in the world. I've always said, plenty of fishes in the sea. Go fish again. Right? Keep fishing. Okay. It doesn't matter how long you've known this person. I don't care if you've been married to him for 30 years or now. If in a marriage situation, you need to go to counseling as well. When you set your boundaries, it doesn't work, then you need to go to counseling, or go to counseling while you're setting your boundaries. Either way, okay. Definitely need counseling involved. And if you're not married and if you've been in a long-term relationship, then counseling would also help you guys as well. So again, this is all part of what you need to do on top of counseling. Okay, so you definitely need to go to counseling, and you need to apply these two things if you're in a toxic relationship. So if it gets to a point that counseling's not working, the boundary setting's not working, okay, then at this point you need to think about whether you really want this person in your life permanently. And like I said, it includes family members and friends. And you need to cut them off, okay? If you just need to find the strength within you and let the person go. You don't, and at this point, I know a lot of people want closure. You don't have to necessarily have closure, because chances are that's just going to give them another reason to fight with you and prolong the decision. Okay, you don't want to give that person the opportunity to hurt you again, because if you're at the point where you're going to end the relationship, they're going to get very, very upset. And some of these toxic people can be dangerous, right? Only you know you're a toxic person, whether they're how dangerous they are. If they're physically abusive, hopefully not, right? And by the way, as we're talking about this, if you're ever, I do not recommend you to stay in a physical abusive relationship. Okay, no way, no how. We're not even going to talk about boundaries at this point. If you find yourself in a physical abusive relationship, you need to leave that relationship. Period. End of story. No one, whether you're a man or woman, deserves to be physically abused. Okay, there's shelters in your town that you can go to if you're a woman that could protect you. Okay, but you definitely do not need to be in a physically abusive relationship. Okay, but if you're just in a emotionally abusive, this is probably what we're talking about would apply to people that are toxic, that are just emotionally abusive. But yeah, this really does not apply to any physical abusive relationships. I just want to put that out there so you guys understand that. Okay. Okay, so this the second point is, like I said, you're going to need to cut this person out. So for a romantic relationship, you don't have, if you feel uncomfortable having that last conversation, you don't have to have it. Maybe send an email or send a text. Let the person know. Just make it short and sweet. Say, look, I think we've both given it our best shot. And I think at this point, it's best that we both move along and find people that we can be more compatible with. That's it. Short and sweet. Okay? No explanations. They yell at you and say, you owe me an explanation. We've been together. No, you don't. No, you don't. At this point, when you've decided this is over, you can't repair this relationship, it's over. And you don't even need to bring closure to this thing. Okay? If you're not comfortable, then don't. Then you don't need to say anything. Just end it. Or like I said, just send a sweet text, a short text, or short email to explain that and block the person also. Okay, just tell them that you'll not be able to reach me anymore. I do not wish to continue having a relationship with you anymore or stay in touch. And at that point, you block that person from your emails and your phone. Okay. If it's a family member, that's going to be a little bit more harder to do. If your family member lives far away, then it'll be easier to just cut them out, kind of. But you really can't. I mean, if you have family reunions, then I would say at this point you just really limit your interaction with that person. Okay, just even if it's just down to hi and bye, or I'm doing great, how are you? Short conversations. Okay. When it gets to a point where it's that bad between a family member, every interaction with the family member is horrendous. Is just everything's like high drama. Just cut it down to really short conversations. Okay. The only time I would recommend cutting out a family member is if even after you have these short conversations, they don't respect that and they still want to like cause so much drama in front of everybody and still want to try to instigate a fight. Right? They're trying to pick a fight with you, even after you're trying to be polite and reduce the interaction. Then if it gets to that point, then you're going to have to cut the person out, okay? Which means you don't attend any more family reunions at all. Or if you go, you just go for a short time and you leave, okay? Which means, let's say Thanksgiving, right? You can go, you and your significant other, or you by yourself if you're not with anybody. You go home to see the family. You go eat dinner. Thanksgiving, right? You go eat dinner. And then after dinner, you just leave. Okay? Just make it a short stay. A one night, one evening, 3-hour, 2-hour meal, and just go home. Okay? That would be my and yeah, it might be kind of not, some of you may think, well, that's kind of expensive for me to fly somewhere to see my family and I'm only going to be with them for one day. Well, folks, if it's a situation where it's gotten this bad, why would you want to spend any more time with the family if there's one person there that's going to mistreat you, right? It's not worth it, right? You need to protect yourself. And you can always visit your other family members at a different time. We're just talking about the situations where you're at a family gathering or family reunion where you have to show, right? It's a family thing, so they expect you to be there. Or you could invite to a wedding. It could be a wedding. It could be your niece or cousin. Someone's getting married, or there's some kind of family occasion that you're invited to, and you need to show up. Show up. You go there, but just plan in advance that you're not going to be there that long. Okay, so now, and so we're not saying to cut everybody off. Just the people that are toxic, that you try to establish a boundary with, that you try to work on the relationship with, and time again, they just will not respect you. That's why I'm saying it gets to this point where you just have to really, really severely cut your interaction with that person. Okay. And so, like I said, with your other family members that you don't have a problem with, you can always agree to see them another time. Right? We don't have to try to, get everyone. We don't need to interact with everybody one time, the one time that we're there, right? There'd be other, I'm sure you can creatively find other ways to meet with your other family members or talk to them on the phone, FaceTime them to be able to interact with them and just chat with them. But at these kind of family reunions or family kind of gatherings that you're with everybody and you're with that toxic person or toxic people, maybe one person, right? Can be, I know people that might have 2 or 3 toxic family members there. You definitely don't want to be there that long. You definitely want to shorten that stay and just leave. Okay? So you will feel much happier. It's not going to be easy. I'll be honest with you. When you practice this, it's not going to feel easy. Even when you do the boundary setting, none of these steps are going to feel like, it's not going to be comfortable. They're uncomfortable things, but folks, you've got to do it for your own self protection. And in time, like anything else in life, the more you practice it, the more you practice self preservation and protect yourself, the easier it's going to get. I promise you. Okay. In the beginning, it's going to feel really odd because you're so used to being accommodating. If you're a people pleaser, like a lot of us are, that's all you know is how to please people, right? So this is going to be totally the opposite of having to hold back, having to set boundaries, set consequences, and then cut people out if need be. It's going to feel foreign to you in the beginning, and it's going to take time until you practice it. And then after a while, I promise you, if you practice enough, you will get stronger internally. You'll get stronger, and it will become second nature to you after a while, where it won't feel uncomfortable anymore. And you'll be thankful later on when you've cut out all these toxic people out of your life. You'll be so much happier, more peaceful. And believe it or not, when you start doing that, other people will replace those people. Other people will come into your life that are healthier and happier. You will notice that when you make room in your life for other people, for new people to come in, it's gonna change everything about your whole life. Your whole life will change. It will improve, and you'll feel a lot happier later on. But you got to do this hard work in the beginning to protect yourself. Okay? If you were to closely look at their lives, I said this already, you would see that the toxicity has affected their entire life and all those who deal with them, family, friends, coworkers, etc. It's not a surprise or coincidence that anyone who gets close to these toxic people will eventually get hurt. So that's why I was saying earlier, as we talked about, why you don't want to take things personally, because everyone around them that do associate with them, they're also getting hurt. So that's why you must stay away from them and protect yourself. Think of these people as snakes. Snakes will bite anyone that gets close to them, right? So this may be something that you may want to think about the next time you're talking to, interacting with a toxic person. Think of them as a snake. Now, most of us women, we don't like snakes, okay? And some men don't like snakes either. But I want you to get that visual. Picture them as a snake. Now, we all know about snakes, right? I don't know that much about snakes, but I do know enough to know that if they're venomous, or even if they're not venomous, they still have poison, right? They still will bite you, okay? Even if they're not poisonous, that's what I meant to say. If they're venomous, and some are, even if the snakes are not venomous, they will still bite you, okay, if you get close to them. So it's the same thing. If you get too close to a toxic person, they will eventually hurt you. No question about it. So if we need to look at them as snakes, okay? As my ex-husband used to say, if you play with a snake long enough, you eventually get bit. So stop playing with the snake. As I said, you've heard, some of you heard me say in my previous videos, my ex-husband and I are very good friends, and we still keep in touch to this day. We're very, very good friends. And that's something he used to always say to me. He used to say to me that if you play with the snake long enough, you will eventually get bit. So stop playing with snakes. Okay. So after we had divorced, we still remained friends. And when and this subject usually came up whenever I met a guy or I dated somebody that was toxic, and this is what he would always say to me. And it's true. If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So that's something, just keep that in mind the next time you're around someone that's toxic. If you think of them as a snake, it will definitely change your perception of the situation. Just like a snake is filled with venom and a toxic person is filled with hatred, both will poison all those who allow them into their lives. This is worth repeating. Let me say this again. Just like a snake is filled with venom and a toxic person is filled with hatred, both will poison all those who allow them into their lives. I know it's easier said than done, but as you practice setting boundaries for yourself, it will get easier. Because up until now, we were trying to be nice and to change ourselves to accommodate those toxic behaviors. So we're not used to protecting ourselves and saying no to toxicity. We can choose not to deal with toxic people. And that pertains to not only your romantic partners, but also your choice of friends, family, relatives, and anyone or anything. You get to pick who you want in your life. So don't forget that, okay? You get to pick who you want in your life. As an example, and I want to just give some examples so we can drive this point home. If a thief or murderer came to your front door, you wouldn't just welcome them into your house, right? So if we wouldn't allow strangers that are dangerous into our house, why would we allow toxic people in our lives? The same principle applies here. Toxic people can rob us of our joy, peace, and happiness if we allow them in our lives. So think about that for a moment, folks. If you knew there was a thief or murderer at your front door, would you allow them into your lives? Would you open that front door and let them into your house? Of course not, right? So it's the same principle here. You know, we know these people are toxic, so why are we putting up with it? Why are we still allowing them why are we allowing them access into our lives? So most of us have deep hidden wounds from childhood that need to be healed. So this is the reason why some of us are allowing toxicity, how we got to this point. Okay, we're going to talk about this. Most of us have deep hidden wounds from childhood that need to be healed. It's these wounds that are causing us subconsciously to continually play out our unhealthy dynamics in relationships that we developed in our childhood. So when you seek a counselor, this is the kind of things they're going to be going over. There's things that have traumatized you since childhood. Things, either events that have happened or people, outsiders, strangers, your environment. It could be even your own family members that have traumatized you. And so we need to seek a professional trained counselor to help us heal those wounds so we can reprogram our minds and clean out the filters that have been distorted. The childhood trauma has clouded our filters, and we were too young to know how to uncloud or clean out our filters. As kids, we just felt the pain and hurt inflicted on us and stuffed those unwanted, unpleasant feelings inside. We would just hold our unpleasantness inside. When we then learn to live with and accept those unhealthy relationships, and then we spend years trying to do more and more to try to and change the dynamic of our relationships, so we can feel loved and happy. So this is what happens, folks. It could be a number of things. It could be one major event, or it could be a number of events that have happened to us, which we don't really think about because they happened back when we were really young, but they're subconsciously planted in our memory, right? And so we're still reacting to that as adults. Whatever relationships we weren't able to whatever unhealthy relationships we had in childhood, we're still trying to, as we become adults, we try extra hard to be nice, to be accommodating, to be the people pleaser. And we did that as a child just to make peace, right? If somebody, let's say a parent or a sibling or someone wasn't treating us right, we were only kids, right? So the way we would make us happy is that we would do everything we can to accommodate and please that person to make them happy so they don't treat us badly. So that, in a way, it is kind of like being codependent, and that's how we develop becoming a people pleaser. We do that for our own. At that time, we were doing it to protect ourselves as kids, but it's not really the best way, the healthy way to protect ourselves. But when you're a child, you really have no choice, right? If it happens, if the toxic person is your family member, or your parents, or your siblings, you can't exactly go anywhere else, right? Unless it becomes like physical abuse, then child services can intervene, and that's a different story. We're just talking about just emotional abuse or being mistreated in childhood. So that's why you need to go see a counselor, because as in childhood we've developed these ways of coping that are not the healthiest way, and then there's filters, is what I like to call them. It's kind of like a wall that we have. These filters that used to be, clean, are now cloudy from all the junk and stuff that we accepted as kids, right? That we thought was normal after a while. So now our filter is not is dirty, it's not clean anymore. So how we perceive the outside world is through these cloudy filters that are not healthy. Okay, so when you see it, when you go and see counseling, your counselor will help unravel all this, help you heal, help you, and you'll grieve through this, right? It's painful, but it's worth it at the end. If you can heal, if you can get healed, it's worth every teardrop that you shed. So as kids, we just felt the pain and hurt inflicted on us and stuffed those unwanted, unpleasant feelings. We then learn to live with and accept those unhealthy relationships. And then we spend years trying to do more and more and try to change the dynamic of our relationships so we can feel loved and happy. So if you can picture this pattern, folks, if you're used to trying to be nice and to accommodate a toxic person in childhood, unknowns to you, when you get older as an adult, you're still playing out that dynamic, but just with somebody else. So it's no surprise that your partner, that your romantic partner, you'll end up unconsciously attracted, picking out romantic partners that kind of mimic the dynamic relationship you had with, let's say, the toxic person in childhood. And you don't realize that you're doing this, but you're still trying to somehow win that relationship, right? The only way that you knew how to appease that toxic person when you were a child was to be a people pleaser and to do everything you can to be nice. Well, we continue that on to our adulthood. And we find that we don't get anywhere, right? How many times have you been in a toxic relationship? You try to be as nice as you can. You try to be nicer to that person. Has that worked? No, of course not, right? And so this is what we're talking about here. And when you live with that dysfunction long enough, for years and years, it starts feeling normal to you. We are only then familiar with the unhealthy filters and gravitate to the familiar unhealthy relationship dynamics that we grew up with. This is key. So as another example, if you had a father who was emotionally unavailable, then you may later in life find yourself seeking out relationships with men who are only emotionally unavailable, like your father, because it's what you grew up with and feels familiar to you. So I want you to stop and just think about this for a minute. If you think back on all your, let's say, the last 3 relationships, major relationships you've had, and if they were all toxic, if you think about where that could have come from, right? Like in this one example, we said if you had a father who was emotionally unavailable, chances are the toxic relationships you're attracted to or you're attracting into your life are people that are similar in that dynamic. The person is emotionally unavailable because that's what you're used to. You think as a kid, when you're just a small child, you think, okay, all men are like this because my father's like this, right? You're not really exposed to any other men in your life to see a comparison, to see whether this is really normal behavior. As a child, you don't know what's normal, unnormal. You just think, okay, this is my family, this must be normal. And then years enough, you stay in that situation, you grow up in that family long enough, it becomes like normal to you. It becomes like normal, even though it's not really normal to the outside world. So then now you enter adulthood, and now you start to date. You start to go out and date people. You meet new people. Who are the people you're going to gravitate towards? The people that feel familiar to you, right? If you meet a guy who's very emotionally available, who is open and honest, likes to talk to you, and is friendly, and you're gonna feel weird because you're not used to that. You're used to growing up in a family where the father's unemotional, in a bad mood. No, proud chances are they're unemotional. They don't say very much, right? They don't talk very much. They're kind of quiet. They appear to be strong. And those are the kind of the silent types, right? Don't be surprised if you find yourself attracted to men like that. And then you spend the rest of your adulthood trying to please that toxic person like you did with your father, right? You try to do all you can to be the best that you can be, nicer, and try to make that person happy all the time. But you can never make that person happy, right? Just like your father probably is still not a very happy man, emotionally unavailable. So it's important to kind of take a step back. If you find yourself in a toxic relationship, this is why. This is why counseling is so important. So the counselor can unpack all of this for you. Okay, and there may be even other things in your memory that you haven't thought about that the counselor will probably help you go over all that, go over all the crisis and the trauma you've been through that needs to be healed. So the key is to get into counseling as soon as you can. Hopefully your insurance can cover counseling or save money so you can afford it. The sooner you heal, the sooner you can become healthier and then learn to love yourself so you can then love others. Okay? This is key, folks. If you don't get counseling, why counseling is so important, and why I am saying it's important to, if you don't have the money or if you don't have the insurance for it, to save for it. It's worth every penny to get well, to heal. Because as you heal from all this dysfunction and toxicness, the toxicity, I should say, you will learn to love yourself. Okay? Because the things we did as kids to protect ourselves, the things we tolerated, the people pleasing that we've grown accustomed to, these are unhealthy behaviors. Because it's not that being a people pleaser is a bad thing, but we do it to the extreme. We do it at the expense of our own happiness and self-worth, and that's what makes it toxic and dysfunctional. Okay. People pleasing by itself, don't get me wrong. People pleasing is a good thing. It's a good trait to have. It's a good thing to be accommodating, easygoing, right, and happy. Nothing wrong with that. Well, actually, pleasing people doesn't mean that you're happy, but there's a place and time for people pleasing. So I don't want to paint that all bad, because there's nothing wrong with being a people pleaser. But what we're talking about here is when you're in a toxic relationship and you're people pleasing on steroids. Okay, when you're people pleasing to the extreme, at the expense of your own happiness and your own well-being. Okay, that's when it becomes over the top and it's unhealthy. Okay, so and that's what we did as kids. We learned these defensive ways of reacting and coping in our childhood and we did that by over-pleasing, and going above the norm of things to try to get approval from those people that were toxic. Okay, so while you're going through healing, it will help you to check out my book, Fairy Tales Are for Frogs, The Reality of Happily Ever After. Okay, so this is the most recent book I just wrote. Fairy Tales Are for Frogs, The Reality of Happily Ever After. This is a very good read. Okay, while you're going through counseling and you're trying to heal, I would definitely recommend getting this book. It's a short read. Okay, it's not a very long book. I don't like to write books that are long because I don't like reading long ones, and I know a lot of you who have a hectic life schedule, you probably don't have time to read a long one either. So this is a very short read, and it talks more about what I just said in today's video. It talks more about healing, finding happiness, and what that looks like. Okay, what it looks like to be happy, how to love others, how to love yourself. So this will give you really good information on how to love yourself and how to love others once you go through counseling. Okay, so please consider getting the book, and it'll be a good read. Okay, so as a recap, if you're in a toxic relationship, you need to do these two things. Number one, set your boundaries. Number two, avoid toxic people. Get rid of those toxic relationships. Seek counseling, and as you heal, you will replace your self-pity with self-love. Okay, so I just want to end by saying that. I don't want any one of us to be in self-pity mode anymore. We've been in self-pity mode for a very long time, ever since we were children, right? It's time to now, grow up, be a grown-up. We need to get counseling. We need to heal ourselves. We need to get a filter that's clean. We need to be able to have an open heart of love, to be able to give and receive love, and to be happy and healthy. And it will all start by learning to love yourself. So, folks, I hope this video has been helpful, and just keep these things in mind if you find yourself in a toxic relationship. okay? So if you like this video, please click like and click share. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments section below. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel so you can get notified on my future videos. And until next time, folks, be healthy and be happy, okay? Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.